U.S.-Pakistan relations are at an all-time low, with questions raised about Pakistan's relationship with the deadly Haqqani network, the Afghan militant group tied to al-Qaeda and based in Pakistan. As America marks the 10th anniversary of the Afghanistan conflict, relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan are increasingly strained because of the new level of violence that the Haqqani network has brought to the Afghan insurgency. Domestically, Pakistan remains hard hit by the floods, and UN officials warned that humanitarian agencies are running out of resources to assist those affected in southern Pakistan. We are speaking with Pakistan's UN ambassador, Abdullah Hussein Haroon. I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News at UN headquarters. Obama administration officials have blamed the Haqqani network with bringing a new level of violence to the Afghan insurgency. Yet, the Wall Street Journal reports that U.S. officials this summer secretly met with leaders of the Haqqani network in an effort to draw them into talks on winding down the war. Tell us, what is the relationship between the Pakistani intelligence and the Haqqani network, in your own words?
Pamela, a very good afternoon to you, and it's a good afternoon.
Welcome.
It's sunny in New York, the skies are smiling upon all of us. The controversy. Well, I don't know what to say. Admiral Mullen finally woke up after many years and said something. Why wasn't it said all these years? Forewarned is forearmed. Well, that's his choice, I guess. It's what you call in America a parting kick, perhaps. Rather inappropriate. We then move to the factor, who is Haqqani? For those of your viewers who don't know, Haqqani is the man who was fated for lunch or tea, whatever it was, at the White House many years ago with President Reagan, and his father was also fated by President Reagan. Now, these, like many other products, there was also a whole lot of Taliban fated by President Reagan. All those photographs are available on Google, by the way. And all these people, one by one, sometimes with us, sometimes with the Afghans, sometimes with the Americans, they seem to be doing a cocktail circuit that I fail to understand. But unfortunately, we have very little choice in the matter. Ultimately, as they say in Ringo Ringo Roses, they all fold down, and that down happens to be in our lap somehow. I don't know how we actually tend to them, but I do know one thing. With so many fronts in Pakistan, with so many problems in Pakistan, and not, as the Americans say, a lot of money given to us. Claim 20 billion, the State Bank says it's 16, 10 were given to Musharraf, 7 of which was for services and sites to be used, airfields and other such things. Subsequently, Kerry Lugar, and the disbursement of Kerry Lugar is less than 20% so far over the many years. And each time there's a problem, there's a flood, they say take it from Kerry Lugar. There is a problem in Pakistan, take it from Kerry Lugar. We're very grateful and will always be grateful for anything. But the World Bank says we've spent over $150 billion on this Afghan situation. And even if you take the optimum figure, 20 billion, as the Americans claim, no point in arguing with it, though I've given you the facts. The fact remains is Pakistan's in a serious problem. We were a self-sufficient country. We were doing very well in many ways. The Afghan situation, 40 years of war, look what 10 years did to you. 40 years with us, we are in trouble. Now the fact is, when you started realizing that the military effort had not worked, well, the question is, you should have reappraised your situation. Instead, you did what you've done every time. You go in for an acceleration. That acceleration has not proved to be beneficial. It did for a moment under McChrystal, I'm sure, but, and I have said this in your earlier program, but subsequent to that, it hasn't seemed to produce the sort of results that are expected of it. And I think that the net result of that has been a blame game has started, and now it's a blame on Pakistan for everything and anything. Nobody wants to view the fact that by keep saying do more, you certainly sound imperious. It's a very interesting book, America and its Imperialism of Arrogance, which has just been written. You can't get it at the bookstores because they're all sold out. What I'm trying to say to you is, my dear, we've taken everything you've thrown at us, even the worst curved ball. Mm-hmm. We've invested 50 to 60 years of the best periods of our life in you. And today, we're getting treated like a pariah. Very, very sad, shameful, and I think not what you expect of a great country like America. I believe you should have talked to your allies. I believe you should have heeded whatever we said. I believe before the blame game. What do you mean, Haqqani? I said to the Security Council the other day that who announced the meeting between a special messenger of Mullah Omar and Mr. Rabbani, who was a very high profile target? It was the president of Afghanistan who called him back from Iran. And who was with him? Stanekzai, his lieutenant. Who was the meeting for? Rahmatullah Wahid Yar, whom this Security Council had given release to from the Al-Qaeda list. He substitutes himself at the last moment, and when asked, said, I've been duped, I didn't realize what was happening. For God's sakes, when you're dealing with a man who was so crucial to the entire... Rabbani was not an ordinary man. He was bringing it together, or trying to bring it together. He brought the Pakistanis and the Afghans together. Look at him, he dies and the Afghans suddenly want to go another way.
Well, let's start with that last one and go back to the training that you were talking about and the fetting of the Haqqani network. On the assassination of Rabbani, why is it that the Afghanistan government is now accusing Pakistan of not delving into the investigation? For
the past few months, it's been the US of A who keeps trying to put pressure by saying, all Pakistan this, all Pakistan that. Bad policy. I think it needs reappraisal. I think you need to talk as allies. And if you have no result, not talk down to. You know, this is not going to succeed. The politics should be transactional, not coercive. Please remember these words. We want success. We don't want this mess on our doorstep for the next 100 years. It's not of our making, not of our choosing, not of our doing. And we keep getting accused. We've paid the highest prices for this war. Nobody's paid anything close to what we've paid. And yet we get accused. For God's sakes, how do you decide? We said that in the Security Council 3 times in the last 1 year. How do you decide? How are you verifying who you're putting from good to bad or bad to good? And how can you just talk to Afghan Taliban and not what you call Pakistan Taliban when the origins of all Taliban are Afghan in nature? Doesn't sound very intelligent.
It sounds like what you're saying is negotiations are key. And what you were talking about before was the U.S. relationship, obviously, when the communists were in Afghanistan. Now the Haqqani is in somewhat of a safe haven, or at least that's what the U.S. government believes, in Pakistan. What do you do to help U.S. forces disengage? Or what do you do to help the U.S. not be attacked by Haqqani?
First, realizing what is necessary to be realized. They say that the Soviets lost Afghanistan by not learning from the lessons of history. There are 4 points that we keep stressing to the Americans, which are essential to be recognized. One is, history is again repeating itself because the Americans have repeated the mistakes made by the Soviets and everyone else. I think we have got to make them understand that history has very many answers within its fold, and we must respect history and try and learn from it. I think by defying history, they overestimated their own capabilities and underestimated those of the Afghan guerrillas. The second mistake was caused by lack of foresight. And I think, again, the mistakes of previous regimes and previous invaders was not reviewed. The third mistake was the misappreciation of the Taliban. And I think this was a major mistake. And I think they have placed the military effort in the wrong place and in the wrong stress. And I believe this needs to be reassessed, because misappreciation of the enemy has always led to military setbacks. And I think there's a very open saying that goes, In a war against insurgency, unless the mission is accomplished within a year, the war tends to drag for years on end, and the soldiers who are basically groomed for conventional war begin to lose their combat effectiveness. And this is where I think the last mistake comes in. The fourth mistake was a failure to identify the terrain and the Hindu Kush and the Pamir Mountains. These major four mistakes contributed to what I call today the impasse which has resulted in Afghanistan. And with all of this, I must tell you that I said this in your program when they set dates for withdrawal. I said, whenever anyone has set dates for withdrawal in Afghanistan, before their armies have effectively left their borders, their imposed government falls and runs with them towards the borders. You have undermined yourselves completely.
By setting an exit date.
I said this to you previously, if you remember.
Yes, absolutely.
And also, I think this is very important to be understood, and that is, what is it that you can't talk to us about? You talked about everything, but you just tell us, okay, no. Talk to us, understand us. Now, especially when you say you're leaving, talk to us.
And what would be your advice on Haqqani today? First, let me just ask you a direct question. Is there because of this history that the United States did have also with Haqqani, and maybe with secret talks trying to get them around to peace talks, what would you say to do today? And is there a relationship that still exists between the Pakistani intelligence, the ISI, and Haqqani, those allegations?
Try to understand one thing. Winston Churchill was talking to the top junta of generals in Germany during the Second World War. Similarly, all over the world, people have to keep accesses open to opposing forces so that they might be able to influence or change events in history. So today, why are you... Oh, let me explain to you. You brought in a government, you removed the kingship and said, we will not restore, not remove, you didn't restore the kingship. You said, no, we're going for democracy. Fine. You go for democracy, the first thing you do is say that these elections which were held were unfair and we cannot accept them. Peter Galbraith, remember that whole thing? Mm-hmm. All right. Then you say, at that time, we followed your lead and said, sacrosanct, elections are okay. Today, you have also said elections are okay. So you've gone from a position of democracy, bad elections, okay elections. We followed you there also. The question is, what were you planning? Then you put the man in a situation that you started talking to the Taliban. The Century Foundation had meetings with Pickering, Brahimi, Laurentis, and many others. I was in these meetings and I said, look, I ask you one question. Have you got Karzai on board? And the answer was he will have to come on board. Nothing went off the ground because he never came on board.
Now, speaking of President Karzai, just to change the subject for 1 second, there was news today that there was a plot foiled to assassinate him by Haqqani
There
leaders.
will be thousands of plots. Haqqani, come on. Look, you remember when Rabbani got killed?
Yes.
Who had called Rabbani from Iran, President Karzai, on the good faith that he had been approached, that an important message was coming from Mullah Omar? Who brought that man to the meeting was Rahmatullah Wahid, who had been put free by the Security Council here on the say-so of the Afghan government. Who, because you know the Afghan government was part of the system of removing these people from this, who then allowed the whole thing to happen, whether by good faith or whether by accident, it happened. He was a high-value target, you should have protected him.
So those responsible are the Afghan government, really, is what you're saying.
Let me say, how does the Haqqani government come in? All of a sudden, a governor of Balak, who doesn't know much else, turns around and says, I'd been approached by a Akhundzada who said to me that these people are from Quetta. So they must be part of the Quetta Shura. And their own intelligence agency said, and it was even funnier, because the spokesman of the Taliban in Afghanistan said, we've done it. When the world pressure built up, they said, we didn't do it, something else, we made a mistake. Now, And then we suddenly see it turning towards the towards Pakistan. So they say, oh, the Quetta Shura must have done it. The governor of Balkh says, it must have been the Quetta Shura, and if it's the Quetta Shura, it's the ISI. Presumption, presumption, presumption. Every time. I'm talking of the UN report that came out a little while ago, where Richard Barrett spoke, and I went to Barrett and I said, Richard, your credible sources you quote, each one when we investigate turns out to be an Afghan official. How come Afghan officials who've now joined you are suddenly God's gospel truth, and we who've been in a war with you for 40 years are not believed in? There's something wrong somewhere.
And so the Secretary...
Let me finish
yes.
that. And then you get to another point. All of a sudden, after he finishes, another man stands up, literally on a pathway somewhere, and said, if it is the ISI, and it has been commanded by the government of Pakistan. Any jackal hooting in Afghanistan suddenly becomes credible evidence. And Pakistan is, after all these years, we've given you the maximum renditions. We've given you, do you know in New York why nothing happened on the 11th of May? I beg your pardon, on the 11th of September? Because you gave us a list saying, we think these 3 people, help us find them, may attack New York. We went out of the way on the 5th of September, they were handed over to you, and the Americans announced from Washington, and the White House said, fantastic, we've got the people that could have harmed us. And by God's grace, nothing happened. Maybe there were others who couldn't do anything. But 3 key people are handed over, if you remember,
yes,
on the 5th of September. Did you get thanked for it? No. Were the people told of America the reason New York has been safe is the Pakistanis helped us capture these people?
So your point is that Pakistan, I don't mean to interrupt because you have such a wealth of information, Pakistan is trying to get rid of Haqqani itself.
I have a 60-year investment in this country. I have given the best of my country to this country. We have done everything. We've talked about this before. Who do you think helped end the Vietnam War? Pakistan. We opened the doors, we arranged with Peking for Henry Kissinger in 1969 to fly to Islamabad, fly to Peking in a Pakistani plane, and that started the settlement on Vietnam, after which you walked out of Vietnam. We are peacemakers. We are not, as people keep claiming, terrorists. There may have been a section of Pakistan led from that war against the Soviets into this sort of activity. You abandoned the area. We were left with something in our lap which we didn't have the wherewithal or resources. So you pointed to us and bullied, saying, okay, do this or this. I mean, come off it.
And do you think Pakistan's being scapegoated? Is that...
Pakistan has been a scapegoat. Listen, my dear, we may have 2% or 3% or 5% of those people that are flashed on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Washington Post every morning. What about the rest of us who try to live in peace? What about the rest of us who's trying to make a go of Pakistan? What about the rest of us who respect our relationships with you people? There is a diaspora of 2 million Pakistanis in America. If there was one chap who tried to do mischief in Times Square who was not even a Pakistani, he was an American citizen, how could you blame Pakistan? What about the 1,999,999? What about them? What about all of us who contribute to the arts, to the various aspects of America which you tend to overlook? For God's sakes, let's be fair.
So tell me, I wish we could talk all afternoon. Tell me, I appreciate it. What is your message in terms of how can the United States get rid of this Pakistani insurgency, at least the part that's the Haqqani network? In other words, drones, bombing, negotiation. I hate to be so specific, but what's your advice?
You know, what I say to you is, let's be clear about one thing. I don't know what got Admiral Mullen started to talk at this late stage, but if I was a president of a country, and one of my underlings, after retiring from duty or on the eve of retirement, suddenly said, blah, 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 the first question I would have asked, you were 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, whatever, 4 years in that post. If you didn't report it then, I would say that is absconding from duty. isn't it?
Well, the Defense Secretary, Leon Panetta, has now backed off that a bit and said they want Pakistan to help fight. Do you think
but Pakistan is still helping to fight, my dear. We're not about to lose our investment in America. Despite everything you do, President Karzai went to Afghanistan. Why did he go to Afghanistan? Because the battle in his mind is over. Having lost Rabbani, having lost even his own brother, he has now tied back towards the Americans a little more conveniently with Abdullah, who said, go to India. We love the Indians. We're talking to the Indians. We're going to try and make peace between India and Pakistan. But tell me something. I said it on television 2 days ago here to BBC. I say it to you. Whether it's the Iranians, Pakistanis, or Indians, or anyone who comes to replace the Americans in Afghanistan will not be friends. The Afghans will call them enemies. Because when the Americans helped the Afghans against the Russians, they were called friends. When they went in themselves, they were called enemies. So first I would tell every power in the region, are you willing to become an enemy? And the answer would be no. Because nobody wants to get involved in this thing. So let's put it this way. But you know, despite that, I can identify one country to you which may unfortunately still stand by you and go in, and that's Pakistan. And look how you are treating us. I am so seriously saddened and indignant on how we've been treated. You can just keep saying, oh, you've done this, oh, you've done... Don't punish Pakistan time and again. You've done it for a long enough time. For what? We have paid a price you haven't paid. 9/11 pales in comparison to the number of deaths within Pakistan for standing by your side. And you can't recognize that? What a shame, if you ask me. What a shame.
Well, we will have to go to the administration to respond to that.
Please do.
But thank you very much. I wish we could talk all afternoon. Thank you for a very comprehensive
Pamela,
discussion.
I reiterate, we've got to sort this problem. Ultimately, remember, when you go into battle and you look around, you'll find few people standing, we'll still be there. But respect us, help our economy recover. We have wasted our economy on you. It's time now that you are making these accusations, and we shall start making these accusations. And for what? We don't want anything for ourselves. And don't keep calling us corrupt and inefficient and mismanaged. That's part of the game called Asia. And you knew all of that. You have dealt with us for 40, 50 years. We may be at an all-time low, but we're there because we have lost our own powers by sharing them with you in a war that we have, seen the rear end of. But I say to you, and I say it very clearly, let's not go into recriminations. It's going to get us nowhere. Let's try and resolve this problem. In resolving this problem, you must have Pakistan by your side. In resolving this problem, if you talk to Taliban as a part of the solution, you can't have a dual policy, talk to some Taliban and not to some. If the question is that Karzai wants to talk to Taliban, then how do you decide which Taliban that is? All Taliban. And you have already talked to Haqqani, as you have said earlier, and I know that. And you've talked to... And there's so much more that I'm still not saying.
Say more.
No. Let's get peace and opportunity. Yeah. As I said, we are peace builders. I end this program with you, Pamela, by saying we opened the door to China. You remember that?
Yes.
That's what brought the end of the Vietnam War. We brought China and America together. Today, China is your biggest supporter internationally, isn't it? You know how much of the American economy they're supporting with their money and with their trade and everything else.
And so your point is bring
My point
Pakistan
is we should have been in that entire, we should have come into the goodwill. We should have been a part, not that we kept, screws keep getting tightened on us so that we, become a nation of informers and a nation of yes-sayers and a nation of... No, let us return to our past, respect, honor, dignity and pride. And let us be besides your side then in sorting this problem. You cannot solve Afghanistan without Pakistan. And Pakistan cannot be free of its own troubles without Afghanistan first being free of all its troubles. That is the conundrum.
And on that note, and some good advice, I thank you very much for being with us. I thank Ambassador Haroon for a very insightful talk.